The story begins in the lively and chaotic city of Rome, where Claudio Verona, a young and ambitious businessman, is hurrying to work on what he hopes will be a regular, productive day. His day, however, begins on the wrong foot when he realizes his usual driver has been replaced by an inexperienced rookie who seems unfamiliar with the city's bustling streets. To make matters worse, the traffic on this particular morning is unusually heavy, even by Rome's notorious standards. Claudio, already feeling the pressure, becomes increasingly agitated as he realizes that his punctuality will inevitably be compromised. When he finally reaches his office building, much later than planned, Claudio is informed that an extremely important client has been waiting for him. Feeling the weight of professional urgency, he dashes into the elevator, where he encounters Marta, a co-worker. During their brief yet somewhat uncomfortable exchange, it is revealed that Claudio and Marta share a complicated history, as they had a brief affair before she got married. The air between them is tense, and Marta's presence seems to unsettle Claudio. As the elevator stops on her floor, Marta exits, leaving Claudio momentarily distracted as his gaze lingers inappropriately. Seconds later, he presses the button to his floor and tries to refocus on the pressing matters of the day. Just then, his phone rings, and he answers a call from his wife, Lorena. Her voice is fraught with panic as she informs Claudio about alarming news of riots breaking out across Rome, leading to several major roads being blocked. The conversation grows tense as Claudio, already stressed, tries to make sense of the chaos unfolding around him. Suddenly, the elevator halts with a jarring screech, trapping Claudio inside. Frustrated and increasingly annoyed, he listens as Lorena reminds him to pick up milk on his way home, a mundane request that feels almost absurd given the escalating situation outside. The call ends on a tense note, leaving Claudio to deal with his predicament. Determined to find a solution, Claudio presses the emergency button, connecting him to the building's maintenance technician. The technician explains that there is a power issue affecting the elevator and that the root of the problem lies in the generator on the roof. He reassures Claudio that a team has already been dispatched to address the issue, but Claudio's impatience only grows as the minutes tick by. In an attempt to salvage his day, Claudio decides to call his secretary, Sarah, instructing her to keep the waiting client occupied until he arrives. However, his frustration mounts when he contacts the technician again, only to learn that the team sent to the roof has not responded. The technician, sensing Claudio's irritation, decides to investigate the issue personally. Meanwhile, Claudio's impatience pushes him to take matters into his own hands. He attempts to pry open the elevator doors, managing to create a small gap, just wide enough to see into the hallway above. The elevator is stuck just below the 7th floor, and the corridor beyond appears eerily deserted. Claudio's repeated efforts to widen the gap prove futile, and he is forced to wait once more. As he sits in the stagnant elevator, Claudio receives another call from Lorena. This time, her voice trembles with fear as she describes someone banging on their front door and refusing to answer when she asks who it is. Claudio urges her to lock herself in the bedroom and try calling the police, but Lorena reveals that the phone lines appear to be down. Desperate to ensure her safety, Claudio calls his friend Stefano, pleading with him to check on Lorena. Stefano agrees, but warns that navigating through the chaotic streets of Rome may take some time. Trying to distract himself, Claudio turns to his phone and begins scrolling through news updates. The headlines paint a grim picture of violent attacks spreading throughout the city. One report mentions a fire at a nearby laboratory, hinting at a possible connection to the unfolding chaos. Suddenly, a commotion outside the elevator catches Claudio's attention. Through the narrow gap in the doors, he sees a group of terrified people running down the hallway. Among them is Marta, who trips and falls directly in front of the elevator. She locks eyes with Claudio, pleading desperately for his help. Claudio reaches out, but before he can pull her to safety, something unseen drags Marta away into the shadows. Shocked and shaken, Claudio peers cautiously through the gap and is horrified to see two zombie-like figures lunging toward him. Thankfully, they are distracted by distant noises and shuffle away, but the chilling encounter leaves Claudio deeply unsettled. Moments later, Claudio's phone rings again. It is Stefano, but their conversation is abruptly cut short by Stefano's blood-curdling screams as he is attacked by a horde of zombies. Claudio barely has time to process the horror of the situation before the elevator's emergency communicator buzzes to life. The maintenance technician, now on the roof, reports that he is investigating the issue. However, his update is interrupted by sounds of struggle, followed by silence. Realizing the gravity of his predicament, Claudio feels an overwhelming wave of despair and breaks down in tears. His anguish is soon interrupted when a grotesque hand reaches through the gap in the elevator doors and grabs him. Fighting for his life, Claudio manages to yank the elevator's handrail off the wall and uses it to bludgeon the creature's head until it collapses lifelessly. Barely catching his breath, Claudio hears faint noises outside the elevator. He prepares himself for another attack, but instead, a young intern named Sylvia appears, seeking refuge. Claudio calls her over, and together they attempt to pry the elevator doors open, using the handrail as leverage. Their combined efforts are insufficient, and the loud, clanging noises attract the attention of nearby zombies. Sylvia, panicked, tries to flee but is quickly overtaken and devoured. Claudio watches in helpless horror, the sight of her brutal demise seared into his memory. In the aftermath, Claudio tries calling Lorena again, but his calls go unanswered. The crushing weight of hopelessness threatens to consume him. Moments later, another co-worker appears outside the elevator, wielding a makeshift weapon in the form of a desk lamp. They briefly collaborate in an attempt to open the doors, but their efforts generate too much noise, drawing the attention of more zombies. The co-worker is forced to flee, leaving Claudio isolated once more. Desperate for a sense of control, Claudio taunts a lone zombie outside the elevator, mocking its inability to reach him. However, his antics inadvertently attract more of the undead. Armed with the handrail, Claudio fights them off, though the physical exertion leaves him utterly drained. A brief call from Sarah momentarily lifts his spirits, but her screams soon echo through the phone as zombies overtake her hiding spot. Unable to help, Claudio is left grappling with his guilt and despair. Turning once more to his phone, Claudio watches a live news broadcast. A reporter, broadcasting from the outskirts of the city, warns viewers to avoid reasoning with the infected and to evacuate immediately. Before she can provide further details, a horde of zombies attacks, cutting the broadcast short. Claudio's heart sinks as he realizes the situation is far worse than he imagined. Just then, the elevator goes dark as the power cuts out entirely. Gunshots suddenly echo through the building, and moments later, a police officer named Marcello appears outside the elevator, dispatching the nearby zombies with precision. After confirming that Claudio is not infected, Marcello provides him with a gun and a walkie-talkie, instructing him to stay put while he investigates the power issue. Following Claudio's directions, Marcello navigates the building and discovers a blocked staircase. Undeterred, he uses scaffolding to reach the roof and successfully restarts the generator. Back in the elevator, Claudio uses his phone's flashlight to locate the piece jamming the doors, but is unable to remove it. As he works, another zombie appears, forcing Claudio to use his newfound weapon to defend himself. Encouraged by Marcello's voice over the walkie-talkie, Claudio musters the courage to eliminate the undead threat. However, the emotional toll of taking a life, even an infected one, weighs heavily on him. Marcello reminds him that the infected are no longer human and must be dealt with accordingly. Just as Claudio begins to regain a semblance of composure, he loses contact with Marcello. Overwhelmed by despair, Claudio contemplates taking his own life. At that critical moment, Marcello's voice booms from above, urging Claudio to open the elevator's hatch. Overcome with relief, Claudio assists Marcello in climbing down. However, their reunion is short-lived as Marcello reveals a bite wound on his leg. In their final conversation, Marcello theorizes that the outbreak originated from a lab accident and asks Claudio to shoot him before he succumbs to the infection. Claudio hesitates, leading to a tense standoff. When Marcello finally transforms, Claudio is forced to defend himself, killing the officer in a harrowing struggle. Wounded and exhausted, Claudio fends off another wave of zombies before collapsing from sheer exhaustion. When Claudio regains consciousness, the zombies are gone, and his phone is ringing. It is Lorena who informs him that she has been rescued by the military and is safe. Though their call is cut short as Claudio's phone dies, the news gives him renewed hope. Using Marcello's body for leverage, Claudio removes the piece, blocking the elevator doors, and escapes. As Claudio navigates the bloodied hallways and deserted streets, the scale of the devastation becomes apparent. Fires rage in the distance, abandoned cars block the roads, and the stench of death hangs heavy in the air. On a bridge, Claudio spots a bottle of milk lying near a corpse and recalls Lorena's request. As he picks it up, a zombie lunges at him, but a sniper's bullet takes it down. Claudio raises his hands in surrender as the military approaches, clinging to the hope of salvation as the sun sets over the ruined city.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, hit like, share, and subscribe to Rorschach Explains, and let me know which movie do you want me to cover next. Don't forget to tap the bell for more.